Hi, I'm Vince Molinari, and welcome to Fintech TV. We're broadcasting from the iconic New York Stock Exchange. I'd like to welcome Jovine, who is the founder and CEO of Behind the Markets. Dylan's had multiple exits in the financial publishing business, selling Tycoon Publishing to Agora in 2011, as well as being the CEO of Lexington Capital Partners, which sold to Silver Capital in 2000. A serial entrepreneur, an expert in publishing, financial publishing, and digital transformation across various modes and modalities of media. Dylan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I am so tempted, and therefore I must do it. Dear friend, hello. Big fan of what you're doing behind the markets. Really and enamored with the name. It says so much. Maybe you could tell us firsthand, what's the mission? How'd you start behind the markets? And really, where's it going?
Well, thanks for the question. Thanks for having me. I'm grateful to be here. And I really admire your stuff. I love what you guys are doing here on Fintech TV. It's kind of radical. You guys are the only ones really talking about this. So, whether it's sustainability or digital assets, it's remarkable. Anyway, so Behind the Markets, I started because, when I sold Tycoon Publishing to Agora, what I found was, when I look at the TV, CNBC, there are 15,000 publicly traded companies out there. And CNBC and the major media outfits, they're basically talking about 100 or 200 of them. Google, Apple, Amazon. And I'm thinking
all the big names.
All the big names, the names that you see. And I'm thinking to myself, there's 14,800 other public companies out here. No one's really talking about them. So we wanted to talk about the companies nobody else was talking about. And we wanted to really bring stories to people that the mainstream media wasn't covering. That's kind of become our mission, really to, quality research, independent research for individual and independent investors. It's kind of been our mission to talk about things nobody else is talking about. That's how it's grown, that's how it started, that's where we're going.
Well, very similar DNA to our approach at Fintech TV, and I suspect you get to uncover value that other people are overlooking, perhaps, and alpha capture because they're underspoken about or underappreciated.
Well, for sure, and one of the things that we've really carved a niche out ourselves is really talking about big stories before they make their way to the front page of the journal. Whether it's AI, we've been talking about for a while, covering this, because we started studying at our firm, how is AI, everyone's talking about ChatGPT and image stuff. We were saying, how is AI changing warfare? We found out that actually AI has been Ukraine's secret weapon in its war against Russia. It's fascinating. Palantir actually has been a big driver of that. So we've been looking at the world through a geopolitical lens, saying how are these new technologies that we handle, that we're hearing about every day, how are they affecting warfare? How are they affecting politics, power, and competition among all these big countries? This is where our interest is.
Well, great segue, and I have followed some of your work, the geopolitical side of things, and you're really bringing forward conversations, again, that are underspoken about. Talk to me a little bit about your view of what's happening with China, potentially Taiwan, and kind of the risk that may pose that we're not really talking about as much.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up. So that's when China started to rise, when Xi Jinping took power in 2012, by 2014, he basically silenced his enemies. He put them in prison, basically clamped down, did a bunch of moral laws. And that's basically the playbook that's been it's the dictator playbook, basically. And it started with Augustus Caesar. I mean, basically the same kind of laws, and dictators have used that forever. And I'm not saying he's a hardline dictator, but he has made it clear that his objective is to take Taiwan. And Xi Jinping thinks that he's a man of destiny. He says this. He believes he's a man of destiny. And he believes that China will not erase its century of humiliation until it's unified with Taiwan. So his objective, and he's seen it, is reunification, forceful if necessary. That causes...
Sounds like somebody else we may know.
Right, yeah, seriously. That causes a serious problem for us, because Taiwan makes 90% of the advanced semiconductors that power our phones, our cars, the brake sensors, our washing machines, our television. It's kind of like modern day oil.
Well, let's just pause there for a minute and reflect upon it. I don't mean to interrupt you, Dylan. You know, aside from peace and prosperity globally and what we'd all like to see, there's a direct implication to the United States, our economy, when you start to put north of 60% of all
it's
chips.
crazy.
That's a massive amount.
Yeah, north of 60% of all semiconductors, 90% of advanced semiconductors. The semiconductors that make our F-35 fly, that power our tanks, that power our
national
missiles.
security.
Oh, it's 100% national security. So if China made a move on Taiwan, that is a direct national security threat. So I have found it, we started talking about this in June of 2021, and nobody was talking about it. It was wild. And, you know, look, China views themselves kind of like Germany did in 1914. You know, the Kaiser believed, they saw Britain as the power at the time, and the Kaiser said, Germany deserves its place in the sun. We want an empire. And they try to flip the international script, obviously. China is much the same. You know, they view it as their destiny, their place in the sun, and they're trying to flip the international script, to actually make themselves a dominant world power. Now, to the extent that they invade, a lot of people say, why should we be involved in Taiwan? Why would you even waste time? American lives. If China invaded Taiwan, they could cut us off from these critical semiconductors that, again, power our militaries, our phones, everything. They could cut us off. You can't let that happen. That would be like cutting us off from oil. It's foundational. And this is why I got to give Donald Trump, former President Trump, great credit for. He was the guy talking about this first in national politics, and Biden has followed through really, really diligently on this topic. Is really clamped down on them, stopped selling them semiconductors, certain sophisticated ones, and passed this Inflation Reduction Act, because that's our response to Taiwan's vulnerability, is to make our own chips in the United States.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the moves here in the United States. Are we playing catch up too late? Do we have enough time for the infrastructure to be able to produce and, frankly, protect ourselves?
That's a good question. So Biden has been reinforcing and ratcheting up some of the restrictions that Trump put on China. So we've concluded that China has plans. They're in, as the Foreign Affairs wrote about, they're in pre-war military tempos. I mean, they've created recruiting offices for soldiers around their country. So they seem like they're testing. They send 100 flights a day over Taiwan to test their air defenses, wear down their planes, force them into mechanic shops, etc. They're putting pressure on Taiwan, and they're testing our defenses. We decided intelligently, Biden, that we don't want to fight a war against our own chips, because the winner of the next war is going to be decided by AI and chips, frankly. And this is why Palantir actually, frankly, is one of my top holdings, but that's another conversation. So we had no choice. We decided, Biden was between a rock and a hard place, basically. You don't want to decouple completely. You need to decouple some, but we can't fight a war against their machines equipped with our most advanced chips. There's no choice. You're fighting ourselves, right? There's no choice, so we had to stop that from happening.
Another maybe question along similar lines, U.S. dollar, the dominant global currency to settle GDP. We're seeing some tectonic shifts, what I think are tectonic shifts, that again are underspoken about. Do you have a take on that?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. So basically, China has attacked our US dollar, and what it's doing is, China is the world's second largest economy. What it's doing is it's pushing some of its bigger trading partners to settle in its currency, the yuan. So before, if China bought oil from Saudi Arabia, it would pay them in dollars. Now, when China buys oil from Saudi Arabia, it's paying them in the Chinese currency. Now, so they've done this with Russia, and this was very not well reported when Xi Jinping met Vladimir Putin in February of this year, is that they actually signed a deal to do all trade in Chinese currency. So China's gotten Saudi Arabia, Brazil, one of the BRIC countries, and Russia, and a couple of other smaller ones, to actually start trading in that currency. The big risk to the US dollar is that there's a bifurcation, basically, that all of China's trading partners trade in the Chinese currency. Let's say they have a $20 trillion economy. We have a $20 trillion, $25 trillion economy. All of our partners start trading in our currency with us. So basically, you split the global financial system. We are no longer the world reserve currency, which has dramatic effects for inflation and all other types of things. For example, remember in 2009 when the real estate crash happened, the Great Recession, the Fed was able to print $1 trillion and pump it into the system. And during COVID, able to print $1 trillion. That's because we have the world's reserve currency. We can sell bonds. If that appetite disappeared, the next time there'd be a financial crisis, the Fed wouldn't be able to print money. Or if it did, it would spike inflation to levels you couldn't even imagine. So we have it's an exorbitant privilege to be the world's currency, and they are chipping away at this as they try to seek dominance, world dominance, and that's just the bottom line. And look, I'm not trying to say Xi Jinping is I've heard people compare him to Hitler. That's just bullshit. He's not a Hitler. He's a pragmatic operator. He's doing what is in their own self-interest. I understand the moves that he's making, but America, we have to really wake up, because at some point, we're going to be asked to sacrifice our treasure and money and lives to defend Taiwan, and people need to understand why that's important before it happens.
Dylan, an amazing conversation. Have to have you back. Before you go, just give me a little bit of a shout out of how our viewers find out more about Behind the Markets.
Well, YouTube, BehindTheMarkets.com, Twitter, Behind the Markets, or just go to www.BehindTheMarkets.com.
Dylan, thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.